Hi, my name is Todd Saunders. I have my office in Norway, but I've been explaining to people all week I'm actually not Norwegian. I'm not Norwegian at all. I moved to Norway about 17 years ago. I was just finishing I'll tell you a bit about myself because it has a lot to do with my personalities in my work quite a bit. I left Canada in 1994, and I hitchhiked actually from Paris to China. It took 9 months to go around. And I was in Bergen, Norway for just 4 hours, and I think I drank the world's most expensive beer, and and I saw this beautiful place, and I said, here I want to move back to. 1 year later, when I was finished my master's degree, I went back and I said, I want to live here for 6 months just to try it out. But the way life is, I started work on a Monday. I found a place to live on a Wednesday with some architecture students. They had a party on Friday night, and I met my wife that Friday night. So my whole life actually happened. So I'm just gonna show you a little piece of what I do. I had a really hard time starting to make a business in Norway because I was a foreigner, I was learning the language. So what I did is actually I bought a piece of land and I made a little cabin, and that's I just wanted to show people what I thought was good architecture. And this is in the Hardanger Fjord in Norway. I built it myself. And then after I did this started getting published, and we started teaching, and I did a second project. This was a really interesting project because we won the competition, but the competition was to make 5 picnic tables, 5 garbage cans, and 1 toilet. But this is what we made. We made a lookout point. I just show you some quick pictures here. So a lot of our work actually is, like a lot of the projects today and yesterday, like Seoul, Hong Kong. This is not my world at all. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I'm almost forgotten from the rest of the architecture world. I'm very, very far away. It's almost 3 flights to get anywhere. To get anywhere, and so most of my architecture is in these very natural spaces. Here's the viewing platform right here, and it's really interesting. The name of the competition when I did this project, because it was. The goal of the project was actually to attract tourists from around the world, and I called the project 640 meters over Ireland, the town, and 20,000 kilometers from Tokyo. So I meant if we made a very good piece of small architecture, we could attract tourists around the world. And this is a great photograph my photographer just took this last summer. And I do a lot of park spaces for the national government. This is for a park space and tower about cave paintings and outdoor park museum. And I finished a stair. I call it Stair to Nowhere. It's in a sculpture park designed by the Norwegian architect Snøhætter, and this was the highest point in the whole park. So as you're seeing now, like most of our projects are not at all urban, and it's almost the antithesis of modernism. For example, modernism has been always glass and steel in urban areas, a different set of criteria. But the way I work with modernism, it's more of using local materials and the natural materials in very uncommon sites. This is my own house I just finished in Bergen, Norway. So now my 6 months of living there, and now I'm stuck there forever, I think. Yeah. So what I'm going to do now, I was practicing for about 10 years, and I grew up in a very poor part of Canada, Newfoundland. I can just show you a quick. Newfoundland is actually on the coast of Canada, not so far from New York. It was actually, I grew up in a town right here, and the town was discovered because Newfoundland was a part of England before, and during the war, the British, the RAF, the British, they wanted a straight line from London to New York, and it went right through this point, and they made a town out of it, and that's where I grew up, in an airport town. But along the coast here, it's all these fishermen villages. Here's where the Titanic went down. And then there's a book written about Newfoundland, the shipping news. I don't know if you read it. The same woman that wrote Brokeback Mountain, E. Annie Proulx. And it was made a film, The Shipping News, with Lasse Hallström, the Swedish director. So this woman calls me in Norway. I never, ever dreamt that I could work in this place. There's no architecture there in the last 50 years. A few public places, but there's a few architecture firms with no contemporary architecture whatsoever. She interviewed 100 architects, about 100 architects, and she told me every architect she talked with was an arrogant asshole. So it was she had a really hard time, but she was sitting on the airplane one day and she read an article about me. It said Newfoundlander living in Norway, and she said right away that perhaps I could be the person to do this. So the idea, she wanted to do, the community was going down and down and down in population. It's 20 kilometers wide, for example. It takes 20 kilometers from each end. It was 5,000 people living there. The client was one of the wealthiest people in North America. She made her money through fiber optics. She retired at around 45 years old, and she wanted to go back and do something for our community. It was this, and the community, just a second up. This is what it looks like. It's a northern community, very in the middle of nowhere. So she could have actually opened, for example, a shoe factory and created 1,000 jobs, or she could open up another factory. But she said, if I invest in culture, it will last longer. If I invest in the arts, it will actually give us a new way of looking at our community. So my job was actually, there was no brief. I made the brief with the foundation, and then we had the idea of making a series of artist studios to use that artists would come there for 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months, and they would do artwork based on this odd type of place. And there was actually no precedence for architecture. This was like the type of architecture that it was an old place where they used to cut up the fish and clean the fish. So I had to look at this architecture and say, how can I make a new Newfoundland architecture? There was an old Newfoundland architecture, and I come in 100 years later, and I say, okay, what do I have to do? And the first thing they asked me to do actually was to draw houses for the artist. And I just go back to this. And I was looking around at these beautiful houses. They're quite nice, and I said, you know what? I can't draw 10 houses on this island because I can't make houses more beautiful than that. So the first thing I did in this commission was say no to 10 commissions, which is very unreal for an architect. Like 99% of architects I know are more or less prostitutes in a way, and they'll say yes to anything if you pay them in a way. And this is what I see all the time. And it's not a rude comment, but it's just a comment. It's what I see a lot, not my near colleagues, but I see in the profession generally. So we said no, but what we did is we bought some old houses and we fixed them up instead. But then when she asked me to design the artist, we said design a set of artist studios. There was never an artist studio on the island, so we had no precedence. And I said, okay, we'll do an artist studio, and then we'll play around with playing on the old traditional, but actually making a new Newfoundland architecture. There was new Newfoundland food. There was new Newfoundland literature, like the shipping news. There was new Newfoundland music, but in terms of architecture, there was nothing new. So it was very lucky. Like, there's these incredibly beautiful sites. And this is the carpenter, one of the carpenters I work with. It's right outside. It's called Iceberg Alley. All the icebergs come down from the North Pole. So, and the whales are there. It's an incredible place to work. So we actually, like back, it was 7 years ago I started. You see these old computer renderings. And one of the ideas was actually to make a space that was covered outside space, an outside space, and an inside space. Every artist we talked about, basically they just wanted natural light and a room, a big room, white room where they could make a mess of. So we played around with ideas, just testing and testing. We came up with one idea. It's the Long Studio, why I was nominated here. But what I'm going to do today is not just show this building. I'll show 4 of the studios. See, it's like the brothers and sisters. There's 4 brothers and sisters in this project. We always make models. My whole office is full of models all the time. We're 8 employees from all around the world. We're very, very computer savvy, but very, very old school architecture. The whole office is models, because when I walk in the morning and the computer's off, I don't see the projects, but the models are always there, and I always sit, if I'm writing, for example, I can look up and see, and my architecture is always in the consciousness. The plan was very simple with this one. We had a covered outside space, an outside space, and then the large studio. And the way we did it, we did a little kitchen inside, and if you want it, like these artists, because they didn't live there, but sometimes artists are like architects, they work till 12, 1 o'clock at night. And they had the possibility to actually sleep above here. There's a toilet. And what I also wanted to do is, just go back, I wanted to make this project 100% off the grid. No electricity to this thing, so we covered the whole roof in solar panels. We used this whole section here to collect water, and we used car batteries to store all the energy from the things. 5 minutes left. Oh shit. Oh yeah, I go really quick. Yeah. So this is. I'm gonna go really quick. Yeah. I'm just gonna quickly go through this. What the problem was in this island was, for 50 years they made bad architecture. They threw away their traditions, and they were just making plastic houses like you see in America all the time. So I didn't know. So we, instead of building all 4 studios and all the projects at once, we said, okay, we do one little prototype. And this is the prototype of the long studio walking down. And when I walked down and saw this the first time, I knew this would be a great project. The project hit the land really well. And then the builders were very engaged. They weren't afraid at all. It was a good spirit here. So I'm going to go really, really fast now with these images. Not too fast. Should I take my time? Yeah. Okay. Okay, good. So now you see this. You remember the old fishing shack I showed? This is a bit similar. It's built on legs because there's no sand on this island. You can't build cement here. And in the old days, they didn't have time to build cement. They were out fishing. So they built just quickly legs and lifted it up, and you made your own platform. So here you have the covered space, the outside space, and then the interior space. This building, I think, is the smallest building in this whole Archmarathon, I think. Yeah. And it's really interesting. We won the Arch Daily Award for the best building in the year against Archtecture. So the building has a really good attitude. So here you see the thick wall right here that collects all the water. And it's a very environmental building. You don't see cords coming here. You don't see the land dug up. The land is 40 million years old, this land. So as soon as I destroy this, it'll be destroyed for 40 million years. So the way I want to do, if this building lasts 300 years and it's gone, the landscape will be exactly the same after I'm finished. So I don't want any footprint on this landscape. And this is, again, the white interiors. Like, I went around to some of these materials here. It was really embarrassing because I probably never use any of them. I use the Derwit toilets, but my material palette is like Italian food. Like the Italian food we were eating last night, for example, it has pasta, a little bit of tomato sauce. It's very basic things you can buy off the shelf that you make anything with. So we use these simple white walls, the same wood on the outside as the inside. They can beat up. This is how it sits in the landscape. I'm going to show the 3 other studios really quickly. There's a tower studio. Because of the distance as well, it was really interesting. We were 5 hours ahead in time. So we would make these models and we make drawings. And we wanted to do a tower where the plan at the bottom was the plan at the top and the bottom were exactly the same, but just rotated 180 degrees. So the plan followed itself up. And when I was a kid, we didn't have tall buildings. I didn't see a tall building until I went to Montreal and when I was 11 years old. And verticality was not a part of my life. 1 story, 2 stories. So what I wanted to do is to play around with a vertical structure. Here, we had 2 architects on site there all the time. He's only about 150 tall, so it's a bit, it screws up the scale a bit here. So he came to my office, we built a model. We went back, my carpenter built a model. We had 150 drawings. Every time I was there, no one looked at the drawings. These guys were used to building boats, looking at models. They weren't just looking at architectural drawings. So it was a complete non-academic approach. It was about handcraft. And these guys, we didn't even use a structural engineer on this project. These guys figured it out themselves. So I was slowly finding out that me as an architect, I wasn't even close to being as intelligent as these hand builders. So it was just very, very interesting to work with them. And we would get, every day, we get an email in the morning. Because of the 5-hour time difference, we can make little comments on the site and then send it back. So we were getting like a 15-hour working day all the time. The tower studio's it's out on a peninsula, and people walk around it. You can drive, and it twists and turns in the landscape. So it's like an apostrophe on the landscape. And I show you this picture now. This is my photographer from Norway, but I've been photographing this building now these buildings for the last 5 years with Iwan Bond. We're doing a book together with Lars Müller in Switzerland. We're going to document the afterlife of these studios, because I think the architecture of this is, it's frozen music, like Le Corbusier say, but it's interesting as a photograph, but what's most interesting about this building is actually what will happen in the next 20 years here. And this is what I mean about creating workspaces. Are we creating workspaces for a corporate place that everyone goes to work 9 to 5 and address? Or are we giving, architects, are we creating workspaces for an alternative society? For example, like really good artists that are going here. This is Kate Newby from New Zealand. It was preparing an exhibition for the Venice Biennale. And there's a writing studio I did as well. It's small, very small. I was almost ashamed of this one. It was so small and tiny, but I went there with the director of the National Art Gallery in Canada. He's a writer. He didn't know it was a writing studio. He walked in the door, and he turned to me and he said, I want to write a book here. So as soon as the architecture, he felt when he crossed the threshold of the door, he knew what the space was for. This is one of my favorites. This is on a very fragile part of land. Like the waves here are 5, 10 meters tall. So I call this one, when I grew up, the colors for me were all the colors of the houses were very different, but the colors of the landscape were either black, white with snow, or gray with fog. There was only 3 color palettes that I grew up with. And this one as well, it's along a hiking trail. All the studios are actually 10 minutes walk from the nearest town. So the artists can go out there, they get away from their daily life, they don't have to think about their kids or their house or washing the dishes. They get in this zone where they can work on their art. And this is what you see in the winter. What I was referring to again is the whiteness of the landscape, and how this is a part of the landscape and is a contrast to the landscape. And it's something new and fresh here. This Silke Otto Knopf preparing an exhibition. And you see in the winter, it's a violent landscape here. It's not like when I'd love to do something in India, for example, where it's very soft and quiet and the air and the heat. But here it's different. And I showed 2 pictures in a 1-minute video. The second part of the project was a 5,000 square meter, it ended up a 4,000 square meter hotel, high-end hotel. 29 rooms with an art gallery to the left and a restaurant to the right, and this is the restaurant. And this was a gift to the community from the woman. We built it, designed it, we created a foundation, it was given back to the community, so all the profits go back into the community. So now every 2 or 3 years I sit with the community and say, okay, we have this much profit, so now we're designing a swimming pool because kids don't know how to swim there because the water's so cold. And we're designing a boat building factory because the only people that know how to build boats are all over 70 years old. So in 10 years, no one knows how to build boats, and we lose 400 years of tradition. You play the video, and then we can have questions. Yep. It's 1.5 minutes. Just enjoy it. It's okay now. Yeah, thank you.